Welcome to PNACAC's 8th and final of this year, College Counseling 101 webinar series. We're so glad you joined us today. I don't know about you, I'm very excited about this topic. I have students enter my office who are like, hey, I don't know what to do with NCAA or NAIA, what I'd like to play, blank sport in college. Can you help me with this? And many times I'm like, I don't really think I know. So I'm very excited for this webinar. I'm Ray Pepley. I am a college and career counselor in Meridian, Idaho. So it's next to Boise. And I work at a high school, public high school called Hawaii High School. It's our third year. We are a fairly new high school in the Valley. And I'm joined by Palmer Muntz. Palmer and I are co-chairs of PNACAC's Professional Development Committee. So we've been putting on webinars for high school, college counselors and advisors like all of you, and then as well as webinars for new admissions folks on the college side. So today's our final day of our webinars, and we're going to gear up for some new ones next year. In fact, just a little aside, I'm going to put a forms link in the chat because I'm trying to gather information and ideas from all of you on like, what should we offer next year? I don't want to just make these things up of what I think we should be learning next year. I really, really want your advice. And we could even bring about some of those topics that we did this year. Like we could bring the FAFSA back again, whatever we need as high school college counselors and admissions folks, not admissions, advisors. So please help me fill it out. It's a really quick form. And then we are also joined by Erin Jensen, and Erin is she's our PNACAC Tech Chair, and she's also an independent counselor and consultant. You might recognize her from her days at WSU and Western Washington University. And there's always a third college I can't remember, but I met her.
State. She was at
Portland
PSU.
State. Why do I forget that one? But she was there. I met her first when she was coming to my school to meet with my students. And then I forgot to mention Palmer, my fabulous friend.
Yeah, you already introduced me. You're fine.
I didn't say where you're from. University of Alaska Fairbanks. He's amazing, best co-chair ever. And then our guest speaker today is Kathy Smith Connor, excuse me. And Kathy is a wealth of information and knowledge about the NCAA and even just tips and information on advising our student athletes. That's basically why she's here today. And we are so very grateful to have her. She's wonderful. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her in a minute, but I wanted to give you a couple of tips about today. This webinar is being recorded, and so it'll be available on Slack right away, like by tomorrow, I think is when Erin is able to upload it. And then it goes out in email probably by next week. But if you want to see it a little quicker, you'd go through Slack first. And then ask questions in the Q&A. We'll have time at the end to answer your questions. If we can't answer them online, we'll answer them live at the end. And then please consider registering for PNACAC's upcoming conference on the campus of beautiful Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. We're going to be moving to a $75 late registration fee after April 30th. So you really want to get in. You want to register now to be able to avoid that fee.
And Ray, I wanted to insert a real quick, just
yes,
two
please
sentences.
Please do.
For any of you who might be interested, we're currently in the nomination process for the PNACAC board. And if any of you might be interested in serving, I've done it several times over a number of years. I think it's really rewarding. And don't be intimidated to throw your name in and just say, I might be interested in that position or this position. And if there's not an opportunity right now, there may be one in the next cycle. So just consider putting yourself forward to serve on the PNACAC board in a number of different roles that are open, including president-elect, if any of you are feeling adventurous. Okay?
Yes. And I'll just as another just quick aside, couple of my friends in Boise School District who join us, hi David, if you're on this webinar today, talked me into applying to be on this PD board or this committee. And I'll be honest, I was intimidated at first, and I now love it. So please contact me. I'll tell you how I balance work and this great little professional development committee, and it's very, very rewarding. I didn't think I'd like it this much, but but yeah, please join. Okay, so another slide we were going to talk about, I think, Erin, the next, or was that our only slide? Oh, okay, we already talked about that. So let me introduce Kathy. Kathy, I'm sorry, you have such a great bio that I need to read for a minute. So Kathy Smith Connor was one of the most highly recruited high school swimmers in the nation in 1982 before accepting Stanford University's offer of a full athletic scholarship. During her 4 years at Stanford, Kathy won 21 NCAA All-American awards, numerous NCAA and Pac-10 titles, including the 1986 Pac-10 Scholar Athlete of the Year, amazing, and was also on the 1983 NCAA National Championship team. She was a member of numerous United States national teams from 1980 to 1987, an alternate on the 1980 United States Olympic swim team. Wow. After graduating from Stanford with a BA in psychology, and taking advantage of Stanford's overseas program to study at Oxford University in England, Kathy pursued a career in educational travel for many years before obtaining her certification degree for college counseling at UCLA. Her passion is to combine her psychology training, a love of working with teens, her understanding of the athletic recruiting world, and her organizational and management experience to empower and encourage high school students in the sometimes bewildering and often arduous college selection process. Wow, Kathy, we are so lucky to have you with us today. I am thrilled. So thank you for agreeing to do this for us, and I can't wait to learn a lot.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, to Erin, Palmer, and Ray. And I've given this talk a lot, and I just want to say that there's so much information to give out that hopefully I can fit it into 45 minutes so you guys can have some time for Q&A. And I can't possibly cover it all. So I'm going to ask you guys to be ready with Q&A if there's things that I didn't cover that you'd like to hear. So my biggest fear is always not the presentation, but the technology. And I think I just got it. Okay. So hopefully
Perfect. Good job.
everyone can see my screen, I hope, right?
Yes, looks great.
Okay. And I do not know how to make this bar go away. So unless someone can tell me how to make that go away, then you'll be able to
It
see.
looks good. You're good.
Okay. Okay. So you guys already heard my bio. I actually went back to school at UCLA to get my degree in college counseling from a movie called Race to Nowhere, which probably a lot of you have seen or heard of. Very scary movie about the pressures that high school kids are feeling these days. Very different than, I don't know how old my listeners are, but for me, for example, very different than when I was navigating the college admissions process. So it made me really rethink about why are we going to college? What is a good fit? How do we define that? In addition to the athletic piece. So I'm a big believer in good fit, not big name, first of all. I'm also a believer in approaching this with sanity and perspective. So I don't just help kids try and find any place to play their sport in college. I think about the academic, social, and financial piece as well, and then overlay the athletic piece on top of that. In addition to me having navigated this process, my kids are much older now. You can see the picture of us, but I had one daughter who played soccer in college at the D3 level. And then I had a second daughter who played her sport swimming at the D1 level. And it was a very different recruiting experience for them. And it was also a very different college experience for them too. So hopefully I can share a little bit about that as well. So as I mentioned, I work on an academic, social, financial, and athletic fit. And I think that's really important when a student athlete is trying to find a place to play their sport in college, because you might be able to play soccer at whatever university, let's say Harvard, but a lot of people don't know that Harvard doesn't give any merit financial aid, and they also don't give any athletic scholarships. So unless you're low income or quite wealthy, on a financial fit, Harvard might not be a great place to play your sport. And there's 1,001 other examples of that. I have Yeah, just 1,001. So I can share more about that, but it's all about these 4 pieces that need to kind of come together. So since you're here to hear mostly about the athletic piece, and I'm assuming a lot of you have a fairly good handle on academic, social, and financial, and work with students around those pieces already. So some facts to start out with. There are millions of student athletes competing for roster spots. And throughout this presentation, I've kind of picked soccer as an example. I could have picked any sport, of course, but I think soccer probably has the most students trying to compete for roster spots. And there are a lot of the families that come to me start out with, well, my student is a starter on our high school team, and just because your student is a starter on a high school team really has no indication that they will be able to compete in college. In fact, only you'll see slightly lower 2% of student athletes will receive athletic scholarship funding. And actually only about 5% for soccer in particular will be able to play their sport in college anywhere. So I'll get into the numbers of that a little bit more. But just kind of in laying the foundation, there are 2 kinds of athletic scholarships. There's headcount and equivalency scholarships. And for men, headcount is football and basketball. And for women, headcount is gymnastics, volleyball, basketball, and tennis. And all the other sports are what's called equivalency sports. So what that means is headcount sports, you get a full scholarship from head down or nothing. And that's it. There's no partial, it's a full scholarship or nothing. And the NC2A, depending on the division, 1, 2, or 3, and then NAIA decides how many of those headcount sports that you can give out. Equivalency sports means that the NCAA allows for a certain number of scholarships per sport, but those can be divvied up however a coach sees fit. So he could give you, usually it's in a percentage, he'll give you 20%, 50%, 75%, 100%, depending on how valuable he sees you. So those are kind of the differences, and another piece of the foundation that needs to get laid. To give you an example, again, I'm using soccer. An average men's D1 soccer scholarship is $17,747. So again, if we're talking at a school like Stanford, which is what, up to 80, 85,000 a year, 17, 18,000 isn't going to go really far to help fund that school. And then the average men's D2 soccer scholarship is worth around 6,600 a year. So again, that doesn't go very far. And saying these things is going with the assumption that you all, my listeners, know what D2, D1, D3 is, and you might not. So a little bit later in the presentation, I'll explain a little bit more about that too. There are no athletic scholarships at the Division III level. So those students are going to have to get funded with other forms of financial aid, of which I'm sure you're aware of, and what schools give out what. But not everybody knows that. Full scholarships are extremely scarce. And I am the first one to tell you, competing at a Division I level is like a job, and it may not be the best fit for everyone. So I use my kids as an example a lot. They heard what my competing on a full scholarship at the D1 level at a really tough academic school was like when they were growing up. And my oldest daughter probably could have played at a D1 or D2 level for soccer, but she chose not to, because the D3 level of sports, the whole philosophy is school athletic life balance. And so there is less pressure. The D3 level, they want to compete still at the highest level and win if at all possible, but there's less pressure on them to be there at 100% of the practices, give your whole life to it pretty much. And so there's much more balance. And my oldest daughter really wanted to have a defined on season and a defined off season, and have a portion of her college life just being a student and not a student athlete. My youngest wanted to compete at a very high level and ended up on a full scholarship for swimming also at the D1 level. And indeed, her life was very unbalanced in a sense, and very, very much pressure. Same things that I felt at Stanford, where you will be at practice, you will not miss, you will give 100% unless you're in the ER with 104 fever. You're not missing practice. So sometimes it's important for a student to understand that even though they could practice at the D1 level, it might not be the life that they want or the best fit for them. Okay, this slide is a lot, but it's to give you some statistics to back up what I am trying to convey, which is, you'll see on the left-hand column, NC2A Division I, Division II, and Division III, using soccer as an example. Under the NC2A Division I level, there are 350 schools total that offer soccer. For men, 212 of those play soccer or offer soccer, and for the women, 348. So almost all of the 350 NC2A Division I schools offer women's soccer teams. You can see the average size of each team. And you can see the number of athletic scholarships allowed by the NCAA or NC2A. So for Division I, the NCAA allows 9.9 full scholarships for men and 14 for women. And this means total over all 4 years. So for women, if a school funds all 14 of those allowed NCAA scholarships, and maybe 3 of the women are seniors, the coach knows that they can recruit to give scholarships to 3 more women because those 3 seniors are graduating, and they're allowing those 3 full scholarships to go back around to be given back out to the freshman class. So that's how kind of the coach manages his athletic scholarship and recruiting allotments. And then you can see for Division I, the average men's scholarship is $17,747. The women's is slightly larger. Moving down to the NC2A Division II, you can see there's 260 schools and so on through the statistics there. So less schools in Division II, less scholarship money, and then Division III is the largest. There's 441 schools enrolled into NC2A Division III. 414 of those offer men's soccer and 432 offer women's soccer. And then of course you can see that there are no scholarships allowed under Division III. And I put a little very daunting statistic up here. The odds of a high school athlete playing Division I soccer is 1.3% for men and 2.4% for women for Division I. Just to very daunting odds. Okay, so how it works. The process is different depending on whether a student athlete is in high demand. So if you are competing, let's just say swimming, and you're going to compete at the Olympic trials this June for a spot on the Olympic team, then you're going to be in pretty high demand, and it will be a much simpler process. Coaches are going to be clamoring for you. They're going to be calling you, trying to woo you, as opposed to someone who is kind of maybe more at the state level. You're going to have to work a little bit harder to get noticed, get that exposure, and cultivate those relationships with coaches. It's also different depending on when you start. So I usually start working with my student athletes in their freshman year, because it's really important to start laying a bit of a foundation in understanding of what they want with the academic, social, and financial fits. In other words, could they afford a school that doesn't give any athletic scholarships or merit? Do they want to, if they live in Oregon, are they open to anywhere in the country, any geography, or do they want to stay on the West Coast? What kind of social fit are they interested in? Do they want a big public research university? Do they want a small liberal arts college? So depending on those answers and our exploration of that a little bit, that will inform what kinds of coaches we reach out to. And the sooner we start on that, the more education and kind of laying that foundation we can do. The most overlooked opportunities usually are at the D3 level. I see this all the time. Club sports in particular, there's this whole culture of parents and coaches, and then the athletes picking up on that, saying, gotta get a D1 roster spot, gotta get a D1 roster spot. But mostly people don't really understand that there are many opportunities beyond D1. Some of them would be much better opportunities. Sometimes it's even more lucrative to go to D1 because, or sorry, D3, because even though they don't offer athletic scholarships, some of those schools offer hefty merit scholarships. So there's a lot of reasons to look beyond D1 and cast a bit of a wide net. So that's what we do in the beginning. All right. So to get started in freshman or sophomore year, we are also looking at building all of the foundational pieces. So by the time you're heavily into the recruiting process, which is usually in junior year, some of these foundational things have been laid down. So for example, the NC2A Eligibility Center has certain requirements that students need to, or hoops they need to jump through in order to be eligible to compete, especially at the Division I and Division II level. Division III is much more relaxed, and there's a separate process for NAIA, which is a separate athletic governing body for colleges, and they're kind of more on par with D3, a little bit more relaxed. So for D1 and D2 in particular, a student athlete needs to be registered with the NC2A Eligibility Center in freshman or sophomore year. They'll get an NC2A ID number, which all coaches use to recruit them. And then some of the hoops that they have to jump through. They have to have completed 16 core course requirements in 8 years that are NC2A approved courses. And basically you can see here it's 4 years of English, 3 years of math, and so on. So if you high school counselors are out there, you will be aware of that because you will have a list of NC2A approved courses. For example, weightlifting, I don't know, faith-based or high schools. I work with a lot of kids here at Jesuit High School in Portland, and a lot of their faith-based course requirements to graduate from Jesuit are not NC2A approved courses, etc. So you have to make sure that your students are on track to complete the 16 core course requirements in all 8 semesters by the time they graduate. They also have to have earned a minimum required GPA of 2.3 in those core courses. So PE, health, art, etc., aren't going to be calculated into that core GPA. And as we all know, when COVID hit and the whole test optional, I don't know what to call it, situation came up, and we're still in flux, right, with all that. The NCAA dropped their testing requirement, so that is now off the table, at least for now. A point to note, however, the NCAA may or may not bring that back, but as we all know, some of the more elite schools are bringing the testing requirement back. So if a student wants to compete at Yale, they don't have to have a minimum test score to be eligible according to the NCAA, but now they have to have test scores again to get admitted at Yale. So we would do well to encourage our high school prospective student athletes to continue focusing on moving forward with their testing, because we just don't know in future years which colleges will have gone back to requiring test scores or not. So again, by your sophomore year, register with the NC2A Eligibility Center. You have to, as a student athlete, send your transcript to the NC2A Eligibility Center at the end of junior and senior years. And actually, that is the job of the high school counselor, which if you're a high school counselor, you will know that. You have to have your NC2A ID number from registering there for all recruiting efforts and have that prominently displayed so coaches can kind of track you. It's important to make sure that student athletes are on track to graduate with the appropriate classes and core courses, as I just mentioned. There is a final amateurism certification during senior year in April that the student athlete has to fill out and kind of check the boxes in the eligibility center. And again, you don't have to no longer send test scores there. So getting into some of the logistics of the keys to successful recruiting. I tell all my student athletes, coaches on a high level really are just trying to get 3 questions answered. Number 1, are you admissible? Number 2, do you have solid reasons for being interested in my school? And number 3, are you playing at a level that I'd like to have on my roster? So to briefly elaborate on those, especially at an elite school, let's use Stanford, and I'll use myself as an example. Early in the process, especially these elite schools, meaning hard to be admitted to schools, low acceptance rates, you could be on the Olympic team. But if you have, let's say, a 2.9 GPA, these elite schools, the Ivy League, Stanford, Duke, Northwestern, et cetera, the coach would early in the process want to know what your GPA is, maybe test scores, have you taken any AP classes? And if you have a 2.9 GPA, you could be on the Olympic team, highly desirable athletically, but the coach would have to drop you because he could not get you admitted. And I actually had that at Stanford way back in the day. My GPA was fine. I was on the Olympic team, but my SAT score was too low. And they said, after doing a pre-read, which I'll explain that in a minute, they said, if you can get your SAT score from where it is to whatever they wanted it to be, I can't even remember, we can admit you. So take it again. I did, and I did not get the score. So I took it a third time, and thankfully I managed to squeak that SAT score that they needed in. But that is the situation that a lot of student athletes will find themselves in with the top schools, is they have to jump through that first hoop first. Are you admissible? The number 2 thing that coaches are looking for is, do you have solid reasons for being interested in my school? So a lot of kids just send out mass emails or have no idea what they're doing and what the school is about. And so the coach wants to delve a little bit deeper into, do you know what you want to major in? So for example, if you said, I really think I want to do civil engineering, and you were talking to a school that doesn't offer a degree in civil engineering, the coach would be like, have you done any research? Do you know we don't offer a degree in civil engineering? So having done a little bit of research is helpful, and it will get you a little bit more onto that coach's radar. And then the third question is, are you playing at a level that I'd like to have on my roster? So for objective sports, swimming, track and field, golf, very measurable sports, it's a lot easier to understand if you're playing at the level that that coach might like to have you on. Using swimming, pretty simple. You go back and look at last year's conference championship. You look at the swim times that would have scored in that conference championship. And basically, if you have those swim times, the coach is going to want you. Pretty simple. For subjective sports like soccer, lacrosse, volleyball, where there are many less measurables, it's really all about the eye of the beholder. The coach needs to see you play live, probably multiple times, because there aren't those measurables. And he needs to see if he likes you. How do you move down the field? Are you too big, too small, too fast, too slow, too technical, not technical enough? And so that's the harder process in those subjective sports, for the coach to answer the question, are you playing at a level I'd like to have on my roster? So there's 7 things that a student athlete needs to do in order to be successful in the recruiting process. Have a realistic understanding of the level that they're competing at. In the objective sports, much easier. Starting out with the subjective sports, you kind of got to start with asking your club or high school coaches, in your understanding, do you think I can compete in college? And you want an honest answer, not a nice answer. And then in your understanding of the collegiate sporting world, do you see me at a particular level? D1, D2, D3, not at all, etc. So starting there, but you need to get a pretty realistic understanding so you're kind of not beating your head against a wall. Create a good fit college list. I've covered that, the academic, social, and financial fits first. It's great to have an athletic resume and also either a website with video or a video link that you can post on YouTube, because for those subjective sports, probably the best way to get going, get that traction, is to send it out to coaches. Hopefully they'll watch your video and that will motivate them then to come and see you play live. No coach will really recruit just from a video, but it will certainly motivate them to come and see you play live. And then we're developing a proactive list, and we're reaching out to coaches proactively to express interest. We're sending that video and we're inviting them to see them come and see you play live. We're getting exposure when they're coming to see you play live through tournaments and showcases or ID camps. And then we're cultivating that relationship. So I kind of explain it as you start out on the cold list. They don't really know who you are. We're trying to move you from the cold list to the warm list, where they've read your email, maybe they've watched a video, maybe they've seen you play, and now they're starting to get interested. And then we want to get onto that hot list, which is the short list of people that they're seriously considering for a roster spot. And by the way, there's two levels that we're working to get to. We want to get a roster spot, and almost all roster spots are limited. Coaches, let's use an example of a pool. A pool is only a certain size. There's usually 8 lanes, it's 25 yards, and a coach can't fit 100 kids in that pool to train. So for D1, for example, they usually limit a roster spot to between 20 and 25 females and 20 and 25 males. So you want to get a roster spot. And then the next level above that is, am I in the running for getting any athletic scholarship money? But the minimum you're looking for is a roster spot. Okay, so there are 3 divisions in the NC2A or NCAA. I know this is a lot. Division 1, just on a high level, they generally have more students, larger athletic budgets, larger athletic departments, and there's approximately 350 members, including the P5, which if you're following sports at all, it's now the P4 because the Pac-12 is folding this year. In Division 2, they emphasize a life balance academically and athletically, but you can compete at a high level, but still have that traditional collegiate experience similar to D3. And there's approximately 300 members in Division 2. And then in Division 3, academics really are the primary focus. Student athletes experience a shorter sports season, reducing time away from academics, et cetera. And there's 450 approximately in Division 3. So more opportunities there. Okay. Some rules of recruiting for Division 1. This is, again, it's a lot. The rules also continue to morph and change over the years, but where it's at right now, I'm just going to say on a high level, freshman and sophomore year, really no recruiting can happen. The only thing that can happen at a freshman and sophomore level at the Division 1 level is kids can get generic mass emails. And I get a lot of kids getting these and they say, oh, I'm being recruited by Northwestern. Well, no, you're not. They don't even really know who you are. You just got on some list. But athletes can email coaches during that freshman and sophomore year. The coaches just cannot respond to them with anything personal. The date that everyone needs to remember is June 15 after sophomore year. That is when coaches can start personally responding. And so what I like to do in freshman and sophomore year is, it might feel that your proactive emails are going into a black hole because coaches can't respond to you. But I like to tell my student athletes we're feeding the pipeline. So when June 15 after sophomore year comes along, hopefully some of those coaches will know who you are. They might have watched your video. They might have watched you play anonymously, of course. Okay. And then between June 15 and August 1, hopefully cultivating of those relationships is happening. And then on August 1 of junior year, so what is that, a month and a half later, then some visits can start happening, unofficial and official, and I'll talk about those later. Okay, for Division 2, it's very similar. And I think in the interest of time, I won't go over the details, but the important date again to remember is June 15 after sophomore year for Division 2 is also when coaches can start personally responding to student athletes. And then Division 3, as I mentioned, it's much more relaxed. Communication can happen anytime in high school between coaches and student athletes. They can call, email, text anytime. And they can visit anytime. Okay, so as I mentioned, for most sports, August 1st is when unofficial and official visits can start happening. So before then, before August 1st of the beginning of junior year, you could, and a student athlete could go visit a campus, but they can't talk to the coach. They can't talk to athletes in a kind of in a recruiting format. But starting August 1, you could do either official or unofficial visits. Unofficial means you're still kind of on the warm list. You're trying to get moved to the hot list. And official trips mean you are on the hot list. Coaches are actively recruiting you on a very short list. So the difference is for unofficial visits, the family goes and pays everything. But once a student athlete is there, you can talk to the coach, assuming it's after August 1st of junior year. You can watch a practice. You can watch an event. You can take a campus tour, etc. And so it's a really good way to learn more about the school, etc. And another advantage that I didn't put on here is you can combine other schools. So if you have you're going to Chicago, you could visit Northwestern, Loyola Chicago, Wheaton. You could visit all of those in one weekend. And why not when you're on an unofficial visit? Because you're already there in the Chicago area. But on official recruit trips, you can only visit one school. So if there were several schools in an area, you'd have to fly back and forth on multiple weekends to get all of those trips in. The advantages, however, is it's all expenses paid. Usually parents don't go. And you get to do all the things you would have done on an unofficial visit, except for there it's more wining and dining and they're paying for everything. Usually official recruit trips are in the fall. And they're going to take you to a football game. They're going to take you to their favorite pizza joint. You're going to get taken out for ice cream, all that stuff. One slight difference with Division 2 is athletes in Division 1 and 3 cannot practice with a team. They cannot obviously compete with a team. But there is a one-time exception for Division 2 where you can practice with a team one time, and it's kind of like in a tryout, which is a little bit weird rule. The National Letter of Intent. Briefly, how I liken this with my student athletes is you are dating. A student athlete is dating coaches and coaches are dating student athletes. After you've dated enough to know the kind of person that you want to marry, and that's kind of what dating is for, right? You're checking people out. And when you've dated enough, when you've talked to enough coaches, when you visited enough schools, at some point you're going to want to get engaged. When you get engaged, what happens? You stop dating other people because you're committing to that one person. So a verbal commit is getting engaged. You're going to verbally commit to a coach to say, I am going to take your offer of that roster spot and or athletic scholarship money and commit to you. And I'm going to stop dating other people, i.e. I'm going to stop talking to other coaches. So that is the engagement. When you get engaged, what do you start doing? You start planning the wedding and you set a date in the future. So that wedding, that date in the future is signing the National Letter of Intent, which is always for all other sports. And by the way, I don't work with basketball or football because it's like a whole other animal, but I did put their signing dates on here. But for all other sports, this year, this last year, it's always the second Wednesday in November. So it was November 8 of 2023 is the first date that you can sign the National Letter of Intent. That's like the wedding. That's the formal binding agreement when you sign that marriage certificate. But an important notification about that is that you will only sign a national letter of intent if you're getting athletic scholarship money. You will not sign one if you're not getting athletic scholarship money, but you've been given a roster spot. So what I do with my student athletes is I say, a lot of high schools have signing ceremonies on November 8th. I say, you are getting a roster spot. You are a collegiate athlete now. You have every right to participate in that signing ceremony. So I create them a kind of a dummy document that no one has to know, that it's not going to go back to the college, and say, you get up there and sign with all the other athletes that are getting money and signing formal national letter of intents, because you're a college athlete now too. Okay, so conclusion. You got to research in a systematic and organized way to find those academic, social, financial, and athletic fits. Go towards schools that are great fits, not just big names. Communicate really effectively with coaches to cultivate those relationships. After June 15 is when a lot of that happens, until you verbally commit. But before that, you can be feeding that pipeline. Assertively pursue appropriate athletic opportunities, and that also means understanding at what level you can really play at realistically. It's a massive task to do this. Unless you're competing at the national level, you have to manage deadlines, details, what coaches you've emailed, how they responded back to you, what next steps are with them. And so you really have to work together as a family. And I actually am one of those independent consultants that I want my parents in on the meetings, because it's a massive administrative task to work this process properly. And parents who've had jobs and, lived much longer than their 16-year-old who's trying to manage this know how to be a bit more organized and all of that. So it's a process and an adventure together. Okay, so I don't even know what time it is. I'm going to stop sharing. Oh, it looks like I got it pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of you are going to have questions. It's like drinking through a fire hose. And I tried to give you the highlights of a lot of the main things, but fire away now with questions.
Yeah. Kathy, that was great. Truly, I thought I like to say I now feel like I only knew enough to be dangerous before. So thank you so much. I learned quite a bit. There are, I thought there were a couple. Oh, somebody answered one. Someone is asking, oh, Matt's asking, what is an ID camp? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. The subjective sports use ID camp, stands for identification camp, to bring athletes usually to their campus, but sometimes colleges combine ID camps, so that you can get a better up close and personal look. So I don't like my athletes to go to ID camps when they're on the cold list, because you don't really get discovered at ID camps. But I like them to go when they're on that warm list. In other words, the coach has some interest in them. You can then go out to the campus, and it kills two birds with one stone, because you're playing in front of the coach more up close and personal. So they're getting a better look at you, and they can talk to you even. But you're also seeing that campus and trying that on for size and trying to decide, could I see myself attending school here?
Another question is, can you discuss what happens to a student who verbally commits and gets through the pre-read, but still needs to receive acceptance from admissions? What if they aren't accepted to the school? Can they go back to other schools? Great.
Excellent question. Yeah. Okay. And I didn't explain the pre-read. So for those of you who don't know what that is, the pre-read is extremely important, especially for the elite schools with low acceptance rates. Because I mentioned to you at Stanford, I had to take the SAT 3 times before I could get admitted. So a pre-read eliminates some of that stress. Basically what it is, that number one question coaches are looking for, are you admissible? That's what the pre-read takes care of. They're going to ask sometime in junior year for a student's transcript, which shows the courses that they've chosen to take. And again, those elite schools are going to want rigorous courses. They're going to want usually a certain number of AP or IB classes before they can admit you. The transcript also, of course, has your GPA. and they're going to want test scores, depending on where they are with the whole test optional thing. They're going to walk all that information down to the Office of Admissions and say, I'm recruiting this kid. Based on what you see here, is this kid admissible? And that you're going to get a yes, no, or a maybe. The yes is, yeah, has everything we want. The no is, there's no way, right? No AP classes taken, GPA too low, whatever it is. And the maybe again is what I got. Take the SAT again. I've had a lot of students at the Ivy League say, okay, if you're going to go test optional and not send in your test scores, you don't have enough AP classes because it's going to be on this kind of sliding scale. So I've had students have to cram in 5 AP classes their senior year for an Ivy League to deem them admissible. But regardless, if you pass the pre-read, which the majority of colleges probably will happen, what that means is you've basically been admitted. So the application is just a formality. If you pass the pre-read, you've basically been admitted. But there are about 10 schools in this country where that is not true. All 8 Ivy Leagues, Stanford and MIT are the ones that I've run into where basically, and there may be a few others, like maybe Georgetown or a few others, where they say, you are on the likely list, you will get a likely letter, but we cannot guarantee it until you actually go through the admissions and application process and formally have that in your hand, which makes it a little bit, it's nerve-wracking until you get that. So did I answer all of that question? Okay, good.
So,
Okay.
next question is, what if a student didn't register with NCAA at the beginning of sophomore year?
Yeah, not a problem. The coaches that are recruiting them at some point will say, I need your NC2A ID number to move forward, so please register.
Okay. I don't know if I missed any
I think
others.
there's maybe a related question. When a senior who's just starting to get serious about this process, are there options eliminated because they've started too late? For instance, are there NCAA schools they will not be able to sign with, or can a late start still work out? Or do they have to go NEIA D3 or something like that?
Right. So COVID threw a wrench in almost everything. But the high level answer to that is a late start may rule out options for D1 because coaches fill their rosters and there are limited spots on rosters, and you just might not, you might have been able to play there, but the roster's already full. Athletic scholarship money is already given out. So in those cases, if you haven't started soon enough, then you may have to trickle down into D2, D3, NAIA opportunities.
And of course, in today's world, there are often transfer opportunities later on.
Right.
Yes, and that actually is another thing that I didn't raise, but the transfer portal, I think it started in 2019, and that's a whole other big topic where the transfer portal, there are certain windows where current student athletes at colleges can enter the NCAA transfer portal. If you enter in that window, basically you are burning your bridge at the university that you're at. As soon as you enter the transfer portal, you will not have a roster spot. Your athletic scholarship goes away. You burn that bridge. But then other colleges will be able to see that you're available. You're a free agent, if you will. And so hopefully you'll get picked up and be able to transfer.
A couple other questions. These are great. At what point should students transition their free NCAA account to a paid one?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I have an exact answer for that. If you're going to play at the D3 level, of course you can stay on that free account. But if you want to have an opportunity to be recruited at the D1 or D2 level, then you might as well just, what is it, $90 now to
I think
register?
it's 90.
You might as well just get onto that higher paid level so your options are all available to you.
No comment.
I know.
Oh.
Crazy. Well, the amount that they're spending on, what's the app that they're using? NCSA or something like that app. Have you heard of? Maybe I'm Got that one.
Okay, I don't know if I should follow Palmer and say no comment on
Okay, that's what I
HCSA.
I'm like, the amount of money that you spend on that and then to chase in a scholarship.
Well,
It's crazy.
and not to
Yeah.
get off on a
Right.
tangent,
They're
but
kicking us in the weeds. I know.
but I think it's interesting when we talk with students. I'm curious, Kathy, about your take on this. You sometimes talk with students and parents who are doing club sports to get an athletic scholarship.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But in the long run, they're actually spending more on club sports than they'll get in an athletic scholarship.
Yep.
Yep. All the
Any comment you
travel.
want to make about that, Kathy?
Mhm.
Well, I mean, that's very true. And you saw the average scholarship dollar numbers that I gave you, right? It's not a lot. I think what parents are also spending though is the chance to get a roster spot, not just the athletic scholarship money. So, you know,
But they
there's
need to
that.
realize that. They need to recognize that their investment may have a different payout than what they're saying. So,
Right. But there maybe there's no dollar amount on just getting that roster spot.
as long as they realize that.
Yeah.
Question in the chat: how does a student know if they're on the warm list?
Yeah. There is no scientific formula that I can give you. I would say the warm list is coaches are asking for phone calls with you. Coaches are coming to see you play. Let's just use soccer again. And then maybe after a tournament, they contact your club coach and say, hey, I really liked Sally. We're going to be watching her. So some feedback in some way where the coaches are now moving towards you instead of it's all you hammering away at the coaches.
That's great. Another question. Vanessa's a new IEC. She said, what percentage of your clients actually go on to play their sport in college and what division? She's, like I said, relatively new IEC, so her experience is limited. Yet it seems that once kids' families understand how unlikely the chances are, they opt for club or intramurals.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say I'm kind of known, I'm in Portland and I'm known in the Portland area as the athletic recruiting person. So probably the majority of people that come to me start out thinking that they're gonna, you know, be recruitable. So maybe like 80%. I do have some that are just pure students. And then probably 40% or less end up playing their sport in college at the D1, D2, D3, or NAI level, because it turns out a lot of them realize they're just not good enough. Or some of them, they don't want to play at the NAI level, and those were the only coaches that were interested in them. So they decide to retire from their sport. Or, sorry for any of you listeners out there who love Oklahoma Baptist University, I don't have anything against it except for I use them and say, well, maybe the Oklahoma Baptist University coach is excited about you and that's it. But do you really want to go to school in Oklahoma? Right? So maybe the colleges that they want to go to, those coaches aren't interested in them, and the colleges of coaches that are interested in them, they don't want to go to. So there's a variety of reasons why not as many of my student athletes actually end up accepting a roster spot. And then they could play club. There are club sports in college, which can be quite competitive as well.
Nicole didn't have a question. She put a comment in the chat. I just wanted to read. We see a decent amount of offers come around in the spring now as kids turn down their initial offers, which opens up roster spots. Any comment about that, Kathy?
Yeah, well, there are some spring sports like track and field where those offers usually come around in the spring now anyway. And then the transfer portal has there's a lot of switcheroos going on. And so all of a sudden, you know, in the fall, a roster might be full, but then a kid enters the transfer portal or even somebody gets injured. And so it frees up a roster spot. And so for a variety of reasons, there are more opportunities in the late spring for kids to find a spot. I wouldn't count on it, but it can happen.
Great. Another question from Andrea. Do all colleges offer walk-on opportunities?
Good question. Again, that's not something that I was able to cover. So,
okay. Sorry.
Should I answer it?
Sure.
It's a great question. So, okay. This is an important piece. If you are being highly recruited, in other words, you have a roster spot, probably also athletic scholarship money, it is important to understand that especially at the really hard to get admitted to schools, coaches are allowed a certain number of spots that they're able to kind of support through the admissions process, as long as you already are on the academic playing field. And so those kids, and they've already passed the pre-read, right? So those are kind of like slam dunks for the most part. But sometimes coaches say, well, I really like you. I'd love to have you on my team. I'm not going to be able to support you through the admissions process. And I'm not going to be able to give you any athletic money. But if you get in on your own, then you can have a roster spot. So that's called a walk-on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's another layer of a walk-on too, where for whatever reason, the kid shows up at the school, they're already enrolled as a freshman student, and they decide, I'm just going to show up at preseason and try. And occasionally I have a kid where, okay, well, we have maybe an extra roster spot. I can make room for you. I like what I see. I'm going to let you be on the team. That's a kind of a lower layer of walk-on.
So could they they're hoping to have a scholarship the next year? So they likely wouldn't have a scholarship first year as a walk-on, but possibly next year.
Or possibly never.
Or possibly never, just
on,
the love of the sport. Yeah. Yeah.
Depends on how much they improve.
Right. Yeah, that's great.
But at least they're on the team and they get to,
yep.
But they may never see play on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Also, they may be riding the bench the whole time, but
I'm just practicing. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so Vanessa had a follow-up. As a specialty IEC, how many students is a full caseload for you?
Good question. So because I start with freshmen, you can imagine if I had a caseload of 25 per class times 4, right? That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And in my younger days when I had more energy, I did that. And I'm weaning myself down. My husband's retiring this year. I don't want to be working so hard when he's playing. So my full caseload now, I'm just looking at my list right here. I have 25 seniors rolling off this week as everyone's making their decisions. I have 17 in my junior class, and I have 15 in my sophomore class, and I consider that full. And then I have 13 in my freshman class. So I'm probably going to take on 2 more freshmen. So 15 is a full caseload per class for now.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. Amy wants to know what kind of athletic scholarships are available through community colleges. Is it pretty limited?
Yeah, they do have scholarships. I don't have any expertise in community college because most of my student athletes are not really interested in that. I will say that there are some sports like baseball, which I've stopped working with, where a common route is to go through community college and then try and transfer into a 4-year where they have 2 more years. But I kind of just feel like I'm much more, you're going to college to get an education as a lifetime tool, right? So I'm not as much of a fan of let's do this really circuitous route just in the hopes that maybe you can play your sport somewhere in college.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen that actually happen with some of my students.
Well, and it can be a route too for the student who may not be academically
for sure.
eligible
Right.
for
right.
NCAA or NAIA. And in some of our sports, I know that we do some heavy community college recruitment at the D2 level. So.
And I would say maybe perhaps those who financially could not afford some of the 4 years that they
Thank you, Erin.
be interested in, but they can afford a community college, perhaps with scholarships.
Yeah.
Right.
That's one of my questions in the questionnaire I put in the Q&A, not in the Q&A, but in the chat. I have a question for all the high school counselors about community presenting on community or community colleges presenting next year. And that'd be a great topic to us, athletics and community colleges. So
I know we're up against the top of the hour, but I had another question here I wanted to make sure we squeezed in, Kathy. Nicole asked, we have a student who has opted to do a post-grad year at an East Coast prep school. Any advice as he moves forward? He had 20 additional coaches reach out to him after he posted his decision. This was one of those where the pre-read was good, but the likely letter then never came.
So the question is a postgrad a good thing to consider doing for a certain type of student?
That might be part of the question. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it can. Usually PG years are at private high schools, not always. So there's an extra cost. But it can be a good thing. I don't even actually know how to answer that
Mhm.
further because there's so many variables that go into that.
Mhm. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Oh, she followed up with, he made the decision already, just wondering if there's any other advice to give.
Will he be treated differently in the recruiting process, for instance, Kathy, do you know?
Probably not.
Okay.
No. I mean, what coaches are looking for again is, are you admissible?
Mhm.
You have reasons for, is my school a good fit for you? And are you playing at a level I'd like to have on my roster? So a PG year can answer all three of those just as well.
Wow. Kathy, this was great. We had more questions in the Q&A and chat than we've had in any other webinar. So thank you. You were just a wealth of knowledge. I've learned quite a bit, and I'm sure others have as well.
Good.
Appreciate your time, your expertise, just you're willing to give back to us too with everything that you know. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thanks so much. Aaron or Palmer, anything? Oh yeah, gotta move my, speaking of technology, gotta move my Q&A over so I can see the slide. So don't forget about Slack, everyone. This recording will be posted there first by Aaron, and then there will be a link sent out by email next week. So appreciate all of you. Please don't forget to fill out that questionnaire so Palmer and I know what we should be covering next week for you.
Thank you for joining us
Yeah.
throughout this year.
Yes, thank you. It's been a great year, personally speaking. So thank you all.